Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
Star Wars seems to need to desperately return to animation. That's exactly what we're going to be discussing in this video. We're going to hop right on into it. In this video, we are going to be taking a read from CBR.com. I'll have their article linked in the description down below. As Star Wars embarks on a new chapter of its unfolding saga, and new saga, animation is a medium that the franchise needs to lean on now more than ever, seemingly. As the Star Wars universe continues to expand in every direction possible, there is one medium that the franchise needs to rely on now more than ever. It's animation. Its animated series have long been a part of Star Wars, starting initially with the 2D animated show in the mid-80s, such as its iconic Droids and Ewoks show. While these series have garnered cult followings of their own, it would be decades before animation truly revolutionized the Star Wars brand. It wasn't until George Lucas reached out to a young Dave Filoni and proposed a 3D animated series detailing the legendary Clone Wars that the saga found its footing in the medium, off the heels of Genndy Tartakovsky's 2D Clone Wars series from 2003. Star Wars The Clone Wars from 2008 to 2020 spawned an entirely new sect of the Star Wars fandom, reigniting a spark long dormant and showcasing the limitless possible potential of the animated medium to a galaxy far, far away. And so, since then have we seen unfold shows now like the Star Wars Rebels animated show, Star Wars The Bad Batch, and Star Wars Tales of the Jedi have continued this legacy, reinforcing animation's central role in maintaining the power of the franchise's overarching narratives, digging deeper within each of its stories. But as Lucasfilm and Disney set their sights on what's the next best step for Star Wars as an overall franchise, they need to look not so far. Animation provides the footing that the franchise needs to flourish and continue to be its cultural juggernaut it has always been. And so, how has The Clone Wars, its animated show from 2008, ignited something like this within a galaxy far, far away? The Star Wars prequel trilogy from the early 2000s reached its explosive conclusion in 2005 with Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, completing the trilogy's exploration of Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side and the Galactic Republic's swift overtaking and reconstruction into the Galactic Empire that we see unfold in the original trilogy. George Lucas had finally told what he had claimed to be the entire core story of the franchise, mind you, keyword, core story, but the worlds and the characters of the saga demanded to stay afloat. The next obvious step beyond that is the books and the comics, and maybe even the games, that were finding themselves a near unanimous success in the fandom. It was television. This would take the form of Star Wars The Clone Wars animated show from 2008, a uniquely animated account of the Clone Wars that had been shrouded in mystery since their first mention in the original, in 1977, A New Hope. The Clone Wars told its stories through grand, overlapping arcs, prioritizing character and world building on levels previously unheard of at the time. While many fans had latched onto this prequel trilogy, the world at large wasn't quite as fond of Lucas's second trilogy, being the prequel trilogy. The most vocal critics argued that the films lacked proper depth and relied too heavily on the new and promising world of CGI, although these criticisms have since been debunked and is now cherished and loved. And the prequels have found a resurgence in popularity that paints a more accurate picture of the public's real opinion of them. The Clone Wars animated show provided an answer to these nitpicks. Because of its animated nature, the world of Star Wars had never looked brighter, and the also animated characters didn't clash with the worlds that they had been inhabiting. In a more serialized format, the characters of this era, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin, and Ahsoka, were able to be written with new layers of depth and being able to expand so much more on with these characters, giving them so much more time with a show. Most notably, Anakin Skywalker got the chance to shine finally, truly, as the series planted the seeds of his eventual early fall, and that had made his transition from a naive Jedi to Darth Vader more believable, adding so much more to his overall character. In addition to the expansion of characters and storylines and worlds of pre-established in the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, The Clone Wars was the first Star Wars project outside of the films to introduce new characters that would later go on to play much larger roles in the franchise. The biggest example of that has to easily be the introduction of the one and only Ahsoka Tano. Anakin's snippy apprentice, who would end up becoming one of the most influential and important characters in the entirety of the Star Wars franchise. The series was instantly beloved by fans, maintaining Star Wars' popularity in between Revenge of the Sith and Disney's eventual purchase of Lucasfilm, a transition from that. While one of the biggest claims to fame was convincing previously upset fans that the prequel era had redeeming qualities, perhaps the biggest impact of the Clone Wars was this new era of fans it had brought in, providing a serialized, colorful avenue for younger fans to start their Star Wars journey with, as a gateway. So, what has this to do with Star Wars Rebels, and how has Star Wars Rebels shaped the future of Star Wars? After Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm in 2012, nearly 10 years ago, the Clone Wars animated show was quickly canned in favor of starting in a fresh, new canon landscape for the next era of the franchise. While this was a huge letdown for fans of the series, it was promised that the Clone Wars animated show was still canon and could very well affect future stories and projects, and would be lingering around for some time. The most glaring example of Clone Wars inspired content would take long to appear when, in 2014, Star Wars Rebels premiered. While the series mostly focused on new characters upon its initial premiere, it was a clear-cut successor to the Clone Wars, borrowing motifs and narrative through lines and strengthening them within the context of the Galactic Civil War. Both of these series had shared real-world similarities, too, acting as transitional material in between theatrical Star Wars stories. Something of a between these Star Wars movies was a great thing, and would be able to add so much more to a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars Rebels offered a much more different structure than that of the Clone Wars, which relied heavily on individual arcs and sporadic subject matters that displayed the full range of the potential in the Star Wars galaxy. Instead, Rebels was a much more serialized series, choosing to focus solely on one group of characters and their journey from humble beginnings to eventually joining the Rebel Alliance, at that creating it, and at large. And becoming a much more prominent group in this grand scheme of things, the series would eventually come to honor its roots, bringing in characters like Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, and tying the knots sewed by the chronological gaps in between the shows. And, more than anything, Star Wars Rebels stood as proof that animation provided a landscape for more serialized stories, in the same way that the Clone Wars offered a variety of tales. The limits of this medium seemed inextensive, spanning multiple eras now, and hundreds of different characters, and important plot points reflected in the theatrical films themselves as well. As Disney continued expanding this new canon, books and games and comics would all begin intertwining in ways even rivaling this pre-Disney era, and this fed into the Star Wars Rebels on occasion. Rebels would reach its end in 2018 with a fitting series finale that beautifully concluded the tale of the Ghost Crew, while also hinting at their future in the franchise, by which we would see more recently. A cliffhanger that would take years to resolve until finally being explored in 2023's Ahsoka live-action show, but the future of Star Wars animation would grow beyond Rebels, and even beyond the 2020 Clone Wars revival season and seemingly final season to the Clone Wars. I do still believe there are plenty of stories to tell with the Clone Wars animated show, so a potential, finishment of a season 8 of the Clone Wars could be a big potential, or maybe those stories rely on within different animated shows, such as The Bad Batch or now Tales of the Jedi. And so, now that the saga's relationship with animation has only grown in scope and scale, shows like Star Wars Visions and Tales of the Jedi have pushed the envelope of what a Star Wars animated series can really look like. Which, while The Bad Batch continues to honor the aesthetic and narrative style of previous Dave Filoni animated projects, however, beyond this next and seemingly final season of The Bad Batch, little is known about what the future of Star Wars animation will actually hold. If Lucasfilm is intentional about it, a resilience on this medium could be exactly what the saga and franchise really does need. Historically, Star Wars animation has thrived in transitional periods for the franchise between movies. Now, as the sequel trilogy has concluded nearly 4 years ago, and this next slew of theatrical films remains distant seemingly, the franchise has found its footing in this realm of live-action television on Disney+, seemingly specifically with the Mandoverse. While this satisfies some types of fans and has offered incredible shows like Andor and The Mandalorian, there needs to be a healthy amount of animation for Star Wars' DNA in order for it to maintain that stability that it has for decades at this point has actually contributed to. In animation, as in the Star Wars galaxy, the possibilities are truly limitless. They're a match made in heaven. What do you want to see with the future of Star Wars, the Star Wars franchise, and Star Wars animation? Let me know all of your thoughts and opinions and theories in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Of course, this has been Unofficial Star Wars. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great one. May the Force be with you as always. Peace out.